There is a person in every room who says almost nothing. They do not argue, they do not explain themselves. They do not fill silence with nervous laughter or unnecessary words. And yet almost everyone in that room is aware of them, not because of what they said, because of what they did not. Most people assume that power comes from presence, from volume, from the person who speaks first, laughs loudest, and commands the most attention. But there is a different kind of presence, one that operates beneath the surface, one that does not announce itself. You have likely encountered this before. A coworker who rarely speaks in meetings, but when they do, the room goes quiet. A person at a social gathering who seems entirely unbothered by the chaos around them. Someone in your personal life whose silence somehow made you feel more exposed than any confrontation ever could. This is not coincidence, and it is not magic. There is a deep psychological architecture behind why quiet people trigger unease in others. And once you understand how it works, you will never look at silence or your own reaction to it the same way again. Mechanism 1. The projection effect. The human brain is a meaning-making machine. When it encounters silence, it does not rest. It fills the void. When someone around you speaks freely, you receive data. You can assess, predict, and categorize them. But when someone withholds, your brain begins to project. It starts building a story out of nothing. The quiet person becomes a screen onto which your own fears, insecurities, and assumptions are cast. You begin to wonder what they are thinking, whether they are judging you, whether they have already formed an opinion they are choosing not to share. This is not a reflection of the quiet person at all. It is entirely a product of your own mind. But the brain does not distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one. The anxiety feels identical. Mechanism 2. Unpredictability as perceived threat. Human beings are wired to predict. The ability to read other people, to anticipate their next move, is a deeply ingrained survival instinct. It is how communities were built and how danger was avoided. A person who speaks constantly gives you a map. You know what they value, what bothers them, where their edges are. A person who speaks rarely gives you almost nothing. And the brain registers the unknown as a potential threat. Not because quiet people are dangerous, but because the brain cannot fully model them. That gap in the model creates a low-level alertness that feels on the surface like unease. The quiet person has not done anything. They have simply failed to make themselves predictable, and the nervous system responds accordingly. Mechanism 3. Perceived self-control as social dominance. There is a universal, cross-cultural psychology around restraint. In nearly every social environment, the person who does not need external validation is unconsciously perceived as higher status. When someone talks constantly, they are often, whether they know it or not, seeking feedback, approval, reaction. Each word is an invitation for the group to respond. Silence, by contrast, signals that no such invitation is being extended. The brain interprets this as independence, and independence, in social hierarchies, is coded as confidence. Confidence is coded as competence, and competence generates both respect and, when the gap feels wide, a form of subtle fear. Mechanism 4. The information imbalance. Every social interaction is on some level an exchange of information. You reveal something, the other person reveals something. Balance is maintained. Trust is built. When one person withholds while the other continues to share, an imbalance forms. The person who has shared more begins to feel exposed. They have given information freely. The other person has given almost none. This asymmetry generates discomfort, and often a strange kind of deference. The person with less information about you holds more perceived power in the dynamic, not because they sought it, but because the structure of the interaction created it. Mechanism 5. The mirror dynamic. Quiet people often listen more than they speak, and genuine sustained attention from another person is rarer than most people realize. When someone truly listens to you without rushing to respond, without steering the conversation toward themselves, something unusual happens. You begin to feel seen, and feeling seen can be disorienting, especially for people who are not accustomed to it. It creates a sense of being known, sometimes before you are ready to be known. And that intimacy, arrived at unexpectedly, can produce something that sits between trust and unease. Scenario 1. The workplace. A team is in a meeting. Most members are vocal, offering opinions, defending ideas, filling every pause. One colleague sits back. They listen. They take occasional notes. When they finally speak, they ask a single, precise question, one that cuts directly to the core of a problem no one else had named. The room adjusts. Something shifts in how people orient toward that person, not because of authority, because of the quality of their attention. Scenario 2. A social gathering. At a party, most people are performing, telling stories, seeking laughter, moving through the room with visible energy. One person stands near the edge of the space. They are not unfriendly. They simply observe. Over the course of the evening, 3 different people approach them, each under the impression that the quiet person had been watching them specifically. Each leaves the conversation feeling slightly more scrutinized than they expected. The quiet person had been watching no one in particular. The room had simply projected meaning onto their stillness. Scenario 3. A personal relationship. 2 people are in a disagreement. One becomes animated, raising their voice, searching for the right words, trying to explain their position. The other person remains still, calm. They wait until the other has finished, then respond in a measured tone without matching the emotional temperature of the room. The animated person almost immediately feels off balance. Their emotional intensity has found no resistance, and without resistance, it turns inward. Understanding this psychology protects you in 2 directions. First, if you find yourself unsettled by someone's quiet presence, it's worth pausing to ask what your own mind is constructing. The discomfort is almost always internal. It is your brain projecting, predicting, and filling in blanks that were never meant to unsettle you. Grounding yourself in observable behavior, rather than interpreted behavior, is the most effective way to interrupt this pattern. Ask what the person has actually done or said, rather than what you imagine they are thinking. Second, if you recognize that your own habit of constant speech is sometimes driven by anxiety, by a need to manage how others perceive you, stillness can become a practice, not as a tactic, but as a form of emotional regulation. The discomfort of silence is usually not about the silence itself. It is about what the silence allows you to feel when the noise is gone. Silence is not emptiness. It is information, just not the kind most people know how to read. The fear that quiet people generate is, in most cases, a mirror. It reflects the discomfort of uncertainty, the anxiety of being unread, and the quiet awareness that not everyone needs to be understood in order to feel secure. There is a version of this you can carry with you, not as a weapon, as a form of clarity. When you no longer need every room to know what you are thinking, something changes. You become harder to destabilize, more difficult to pressure, quieter in ways that have nothing to do with sound. And the most grounded people are not those who have the most to say. They are the ones who have already decided they do not need to say it.